Hey Snacks! Welcome to Season 2 of Snack Size, the podcast that'll drag you into your most fabulous life. I'm your host, Lala Luzious, also known as the Snack of the Twin Cities, a drag queen that twirled her way into podcasting, and the rest is a dream come true. And that's exactly what this podcast is about, making your dreams happen for you, fabulously. This season, we are continuing our journey in finding out what makes a happy and fulfilled life, going places we've never been before. Don't forget that when it comes to your potential, the sky is the limit, and it's never a bad time to be who you are. Get you a snack, because your fabulous life starts now. Hey Snacks! Welcome to Season 2 of Snack Size. I am so excited for the topics and the guests we are going to cover this season. And as always, I thank you for being on this journey with me. On this episode, I am going to bring on a guest and we are going to talk about mental health. I want to say that mental health is absolutely something that should be talked about. Speaking up about your mental health is an essential part of living a happy and fulfilled life. While I hope this episode starts a conversation in your life about mental health, neither myself nor my guests are professionals. If you or someone you love is having a mental health crisis, please do not hesitate to get professional help. One resource is the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration, and they can be reached 24 hours a day at 1-800-622-HELP. This service is free, confidential, and they will help you find help in your area. Again, that's 1-800-622-HELP. So my first guest for Season 2 is actually my first friend in the podcasting world. He lives all the way in Coventry, England, and hosts a podcast called The Waffle Shop, which is focused on conversations about mental health. In addition to being a rock star host, this guest knows how to party and loves his concerts. He's seen everyone from Pitbull to Eminem to Beyonce. However, behind his huge smile, life has presented some really difficult challenges that he has had to overcome, and I want my listeners who may be facing their own challenges to hear his story. Welcome to Snack Size, Mr. Taylor James. Let's give him a call. Hi, Taylor. Welcome to Snack Size.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure.
Of course. For those of you who don't know, Taylor gave me my international debut in the UK on his podcast, the Waffle Shop podcast, which is one of my absolute favorite podcasts. And I hear it's doing really well over there. You're like charting and everything.
Stop it. You mean too nice. Yeah. It's kind of bizarre, to be honest. I mean, you were like the final guest on my first ever season of it. And for me, having someone, you know, like yourself, or, you know, it was insane because I thought, oh my God, this is incredible. No, I've got my first international guest. And then people started getting interested. People started kind of getting involved. And then it's just kind of now turned into this kind of, I don't even know. Like I'm very proud of it. Very, very proud of it.
So for my listeners that haven't listened to The Waffle Shop, tell us a bit about your show and explain what having a waffle means.
I have to explain it because I think everyone thinks when they hear The Waffle Shop that immediately I either sell waffles or I make them. But in the UK, we have this kind of slang term when someone's talking too much or they're kind of just, you know, talking a lot of rubbish, we tend to say like, oh, they're waffling on. So that for me, especially if I've had a beer, is something that I tend to do. I could waffle all day, every day, no matter who you are. And then the shop part came to me when, you know, the shop is somewhere where you go to get your necessities. It goes, you know, you get what you need from it. So it was just like the Waffle Shop.
So seeing what I've seen of you from social media, because we've never met, you seem to be such a very, very happy person. You live a very vibrant life. It's awesome. How did you arrive on choosing mental health as the topic for your podcast?
So I think exactly what you kind of just said then about like, you know, like on social media, it looks like I'm very happy. You know, I've got this vibrant lifestyle. Like I feel like social media does that, you know, like you see what the person wants you to see. But I never understood mental health. I didn't ever experience it up until 3 years ago when I nearly lost my mum to an operation gone wrong. In a matter of hours, my whole life was, you know, traumatically change direction. I didn't know whether my mum was going to live. I had to become a father figure to my younger sister. I had all these responsibilities like, owning a house, keeping my career going. And basically, I slowly but surely, with being in and out of hospital and trying to keep everything going, I was slowly running myself down into the ground. And then in January of this year, it kind of took me to a place that I hope to God I never go back to, because I just didn't want to live that life anymore. For me, I couldn't see a way out of it. That's the headspace that I was in.
Just curious, how is your mom doing now?
So she's doing great. Like she's in a rehabilitation home. She's learning how to kind of like walk, talk, use her hands. And now, she's had coronavirus, which was fun, but she's beat that again. Like she's incredibly strong, resilient woman. And, it's where I take a lot of my, inspiration from. I was experiencing, anxiety. I'd never even heard of like post-traumatic stress, anything like that until I reached out and got the help that I needed. And then obviously that's where the podcast kind of started, because I was having these therapy sessions to get me, to process kind of like what had happened. And then COVID happened. So I could no longer have these therapy sessions. The therapist that I was so lucky to get, went into lockdown. So I either stop and go backwards, or I keep talking about it and getting things off my chest. And now I'm sat here, 6 months on, feeling like a completely different person. I get to speak to some incredible people, about their own journeys, their own mental health. And it's making me feel like, I'm okay for feeling like this. I'm not kind of beating myself up. I'm not kind of, feeling like I'm the only person who's dealing with this, when there's so many people out there from all different walks of life. And, we're all experiencing the same things. And it's changed my life.
You would say that in January, that was like a rock bottom period for you in life?
100%. I didn't see a way out in January.
When did you start seeing a way out?
It was when I reached out to one of my best friends. I reached out to my little sister, and I was just like, look, something needs to happen. Like I will find the joke in anything. That's my biggest mechanism, is like I'm a bit of a joker when it comes to stuff like that. And then it got to a stage where I wasn't even laughing. I wasn't joking. Like I was just kind of dead behind the eyes. But yeah, it was for sure a rock bottom moment.
There seems to be a stigma about talking about mental health, especially among men. And what I noticed is that on your podcast, you interview a lot of male guests on your show. Was mental health at one point hard for you to talk about? And do you find that it's hard to talk about among other men you've either interviewed or, you have as friends, anything like that?
Yeah, I mean, even now, like with my, my male friends, like it's something that we don't really talk about. And it's kind of, being a man, you're expected to have this like, this kind of bravado, like everything's okay. I'm the man of the house. So that was like added an extra layer of like, like responsibility. Like, I can't look upset. It doesn't look good if I cry. And it's all like, sorry for swearing, but it's all bullshit. It's like, you can't go through life pretending everything is okay.
Do you feel more secure in your masculinity now that you have opened up?
See, I hate this kind of question, because I was raised by women. So it's quite strange for me to kind of feel masculine, if that's fair to say.
Yeah.
Because I've never known any different. But it wasn't until kind of like the podcast and seeing like the way, like male members of my family have kind of behaved with, watching their sister go through what they have. And I just feel like, well, do you know what? I'm so grateful I was raised by women, because I have this kind of wider view of how like the world works and stuff like that. But I see it in my friends. Like, I've got friends who are like, football players, they, avid gym goers, there's this kind of like, it's almost like an act. Because then when you get them like one-on-one and they're very much like, oh yeah, I don't agree with this. I don't like this. This makes me feel uncomfortable. We're living in this whole generation of like, everyone's just trying to be someone else. I mean, I'm probably saying that to the wrong person, considering I'm talking to a drag queen. But
in the general sense, with all the interviews that you've done, what are things that you learned about mental health that you didn't know before having this podcast?
One thing that completely took me by surprise is that everyone at some part of their lives, no matter how old they are, will all face a mental health challenge or issue. Some of them, don't realize that they are. I mean, I didn't realize I was having panic attacks and anxiety. I just thought it was like I had a dodgy stomach, like my hands were like sweaty. Like, there was so many different factors, and it wasn't until I actually educated myself around mental health that I was slowly started to understand why I was behaving a certain way. I think the biggest thing that's missing from mental health is the education. I think that's the biggest, but I think it's the biggest problem in anything, whether it's, race, gender, anything like that. It's the lack of education.
Well, I think that this is a particularly undereducated subject for the general public because no one wants to talk about it. Race, we are finally getting into conversations. Gender, we are finally getting into conversations. But there seems to be something about mental health that people won't talk about. We will go out of our way to fix ourselves cosmetically, but like our most important part of our body, which is our brain, we will just let go and we ignore things. And it's very important to talk about. It's very important to have podcasts like yours where the education is out there. And even if it's not just the education, just witnessing people having discussions about it promotes so much positivity and health for people.
Even from when, I had you on the show, when you were talking about, like confidence and, like what drag has done for you. And there is so much by just listening. We're living in this generation where people are talking at each other, but no one's listening. I never in a million years expected speaking to yourself, a drag queen from Minnesota. But from what myself and even my dad took from that conversation was that, like, be yourself, get yourself out your comfort zone. There's so many different lessons that you can learn just by listening.
What are your goals and dreams?
I think it sounds really cheesy, but like I just want to see my mum and my sister happy. And then my goal for myself is just to kind of find what makes me happy. We're living in this whole, again, generation of like, you turn this age, you should have a house, you should have a child, you should have this, that, and other. And I'm just not interested in that. So I'm on this bit of a mission at the minute to, with the podcast and, various other aspects of my life that I'm just trying to find what actually makes me happy.
What we call it over here is the American dream with the house and the kids and the white picket fence.
Yeah.
And that cookie cutter dream isn't for everybody. And it's so ingrained in you as you grow up and as you develop in the world that that's what you want. And I want to encourage people to feel the security to challenge that and go find what makes them happy. The other thing I want people to notice is that you are definitely doing something about it. So many people say, I want more and I, want this, but then they never actually do it. I watched your podcast grow from just something really small to charting on self-help and, getting attention from all types of UK celebrities. And it's awesome. And it happened really quickly, just like it did for me. And so that really, it's just that small step of taking like that one tiny step towards your dream, and then the rest will really fall into place. And I don't want people to be afraid to do that.
But I think you're a huge example of that. And you were probably the first person that had actually something clicked with the podcast. And it was like, oh my God, okay, well, I need to, all these people, like I was scared to reach out to, I was scared to kind of take control of the podcast. I was scared to put myself out there more. And now I'm kind of taking those risks. I'm taking those steps to get out of my comfort zone. And I am seeing nothing but positive result. There is nothing to feel bad in wanting better for yourself. You need to take that first step. And that is one thing that I learned from you.
I want to talk about something that wasn't necessarily on the list of questions, but I know that when you started the podcast, you were with other people and then you found success and they were jealous. How have you dealt with that? It's, it happens. There truly are, when you are doing well, people aren't always happy for you. And I'm just curious because I know it's a thing that really can affect your mental health. How are you dealing with that?
Yeah, I started a podcast with a friend of mine who is still very much a friend of mine. So I had no control in the early days of the podcast of what was going on, what we were talking about, anything like that. And it wasn't until I started, gaining confidence and kind of understanding my own self-worth and what made me kind of happy, that something was born from my idea that was, again, being taken out of my control. And then it got to a stage where it was gaining momentum. And I was like, okay, well, my confidence was growing. I was like, you know what? You've actually got a talent. This is the first time in 30 years that I felt like I've actually got a talent.
That's awesome.
And I was not going to let someone else kind of dictate to me. The past 3 years, all I've been dictated to, is by doctors, by family members. Like, I should be doing this, your mum's going to die, this, that, and the other. And this is probably the most headstrong and confident I've ever been to say, no, that's not right for me. You know, one, you're not going to kind of push me into that version of myself again. And two, I'm not going to allow my mental health to be affected by other people's behaviors.
It's very interesting to hear you talk about this because I just see so much of myself in your story and really finding what I love. And, you know, for me, it happens to be drag, and people tend to look at that and say, oh, that's so different and that's so out there. But really, the moral of the story is if you are doing what you love, you are going to feel confident about it. You are going to be able to make those decisions. And that's what you're going for. It doesn't matter what it is. As long as it feels that way for you, then you know you're on the right path.
Exactly. And I mean, you mentioned like the jealousy word. And it's like, I've never really understood it, because I feel like if you want something that bad, then you'll work your ass off to get it, you know? And it kind of got to a stage where people want to see you do good, but not better than them.
I don't know if you are religious. I am, and I don't think I've ever even said that on this podcast before, so there's that. But one thing I learned from a young age is that what God has for me is for me, and what God has for you is for you. And those two things don't necessarily relate to each other. So in thinking about life that way, and that when I have success, it's for me, and of course I want to share it, or if someone else's success, being happy for them doesn't really affect what's going to happen to you, I've been able to allow my haters to motivate me. In fact, one of the reasons I think this podcast is so successful is because I have a lot of love here, but I also have a lot of people who kind of want to see me fail. So they will still click, and I still get paid for every click.
It is one thing that I find really funny, because, you know, obviously with the various apps and stuff that you use, like you can see who's listening, who's there. And it's just sometimes you're like, well, you won't reach out and say like, oh, you know, I'm loving this, blah, blah, blah. But I know you're listening. This is going to sound so cheesy, but this is a quote by Dumbledore from Harry Potter. And it says, it takes a lot of courage to stand up to your enemies, but a hell of a lot more courage to stand up to your friends. And
that is very true. So
yes.
Thinking of all the amazing guests that you've had on your podcast, I know some of them you have seen in gigs. What is something you learned from a guest on your podcast that you found the most profound?
Okay, that is a brilliant question. I think what I learned, and it was from, she's one of my favourite singers. Her name's Shingy. She's from a band called the Noisettes in the UK.
This was my favorite interview. This is my favorite.
Oh my God. Literally, I cannot tell you. I don't even think I should probably say this, but like I nearly probably wet myself about 3 times during that interview. I was so excited. But what I took from that is like, you know, you see all these like incredible songs, you know, this, that, and the other, and you think, you know, that these incredible artists have, you know, they have it made, they have, you know, the record contracts, they have, you know, all this incredible kind of lifestyle, but deep down, like they're still feeling like what we're feeling, like the anxiety before they step out on stage. You know, we spoke about like her mum being in a similar situation that my mum was in, and, you know, with a brain injury. And I was just like, do you know what? Never in a million years did I think I would be sat across, you know, on Zoom talking about this to a little bit of like an idol to me. And all I took from it, well, I took a lot of stuff from it, but it was, you know, we're all human. We're all feeling these emotions. We're all going through the same things. It just inspires me with the podcast because, you know, it's come from such a painful, horrible part of my life, but it's now turned into one of the things I'm most proud of.
There's a lot to be said about turning beauty into pain. I feel like it's a lot of the reason why I got into drag was because I spent so many years insecure with myself and listening to other people put me down. It was like I almost had to start being someone else to even like get a feel of what confidence or beauty felt like. And so I think that there's beauty in every situation, even no matter how awful it is. You just have to find it.
I've got a story for you that I don't think I've actually ever told you, but I saw it a few posts that you went, it was like a throwback to when you went to see Beyonce.
Yes.
She bought me a pizza once.
She bought you a pizza?
She bought me a pizza. Like
Beyonce bought you a pizza?
My ex-girlfriend was a huge Beyonce fan, and I managed to get tickets for this TV special she was doing in London. And as we were waiting to go in, we were in this little room, and her sister came out with pizzas and were like, oh, these are from the Carters. Thank you for waiting.
So, My gosh.
Beyonce mommy beats.
I'm so jealous.
I thought you might. That's why I never thought I'd bring it up. But I thought, you know what? No, like we're both Beyonce fans. I've got to share the love.
Oh my goodness. So even though this is completely off topic, there's always time for Beyonce. So thank you for sharing.
You're welcome.
I was going to ask, what are 3 things that every person must do to maintain good mental health? So reaching out is one. What are 2 other things that you've done or you think other people should do to maintain their health?
Do you know what? I think definitely number 1, reach out. If you're facing any kind of mental struggle, anything like that, reach out, because a problem shared is a problem halved in my eyes. Number 2 is surround yourself with good people. And I cannot stress this enough. Like, surround yourself with good people that are on the same wavelength, that want to see you do well. And then the third one, I think, is to just be honest. Like, if you're not feeling it today, or, do you know what? At least you got up. Just be proud of the little wins.
That's what life is, though, isn't it? I think it's a bunch of little wins.
Of course it is. And, and I think it's when you start to appreciate those little wins, they build up into big wins. And then taking a step back and then like, oh, do you know what? Look at what I've produced. Look what I'm capable of. Look what, I've achieved.
So where can we follow you on social media, and where can we find the Waffle Shop podcast?
So I'm on Instagram, Facebook. Instagram's where I do a lot more of, obviously, the interaction. So I'm at Waffle Shop podcast on Instagram. You can find me on Spotify, Apple Music. Just search for the Waffle Shop podcast, and I'm hoping it pops up. But yeah, if you ever fancy coming for a waffle, just drop me a DM.
Well, Taylor, thank you so much for coming on Snack Size. And if you want to listen to Taylor's podcast, I will leave a link in the show notes. Thank you so much for doing this.
Thank you so much for having me. I'd love hearing from you, so it's been an absolute pleasure.
All right, until next time, bye, Snacks. Hey, Snack, I hope you enjoyed this episode. Snack Size Podcast is sponsored by Twin Cities Gay Scene, the online magazine for events and culture happening in the Twin Cities area. Check out my bi-weekly editorial, Snack Scene, at www.twincitiesgayscene.com. And for more fun with this podcast, head on over to www.snacksizepodcast.com to leave a review and follow me on my social media. Until next time, go be fabulous.